welcome back everyone. I hope you were able to get up and move around a little bit. I'm really pleased to be introducing our first speaker for this event. Patti Beer is a self-described nature nut, an animal care specialist, and an experienced scuba diver. It should come as no surprise then that Patti is a senior aquarium biologist with the Vancouver Aquarium. Her role includes looking after the beautiful aquaria that you may have even seen at the Vancouver International Airport. As a dedicated pet parent and longtime volunteer, Patti has also encountered a diversity of animals in her personal life: a dog, 3 cats, rodents, turtles, fish, hermit crabs, a guinea pig, a bearded dragon, burrowing owls in an endangered species recovery program, 2 wolf eels, and many other fascinating creatures. Today, she is caring for a bearded dragon that was meant to go home weeks ago, but is instead helping Patti stay positive during this time of social distancing. During this presentation, I'd like to encourage you to drop any questions you might have into the chat. We'll answer them at the end of the presentation. If you're having any technical issues, please leave a note in the chat, and ISCBC technical support will use the chat privately to troubleshoot. Her experience with, to borrow a phrase, all creatures great and small makes her the perfect person to get us excited about biodiversity. Please welcome Patti Beer.
Hi there, can everybody hear me?
Sounds good, Patti.
Excellent, thanks Corbin. I thought I'd do a little cameo with Beardy first. There he is, our host guest. This is Ruby's bearded dragon. He's pretty cute. I'm gonna pass him off to my son. Thank him for the studio that you see me in. It's lovely. It's great to be here. Hi, I'm a senior aquarium biologist and a Jill of all trades on the Canadian Waters and Propagation team. I'm still working 3 days a week at the airport, solo for safety. And the Vancouver Aquarium and our parent organization, Oceanwise, is also daily. The staff is there daily caring for the animals there through this difficult time. And hopefully we'll all be back to normal soon. So at the airport where I work, the 2 airport exhibits are past security in the international wing, and they represent our beautiful Pacific Ocean off the coast of BC. From tiny skeleton shrimp on the walls to a pair of breeding wolf eels named Waldorf and Windy. There's about 100 species in that exhibit, so every day is a wonder to me. I'm going to share a PowerPoint with some video and pictures just to give you a little taste, and then we'll come back and I'll tell some stories and make some comments, and then we're going to open it up to questions and discussion. So I'm not that tech savvy, so bear with me while I get my screen up.
We're in business. This looks good.
Are you getting any sound?
I'm getting sound. So maybe you can give us an idea of what we're looking at here.
Sure. I was kind of hoping to just be quiet and let you be charmed by the critters and stuff. But this is the pair of wolf eels, Waldorf and Windy, and they're eating. That's Alex feeding them. As you can see, Waldorf's got quite tame, and he likes the divers a lot. This is him swimming up behind Alex. Lots of rockfish in this exhibit, and that's a red Irish lord on the bottom. You can see the lingcod in this shot. Starfish and anemones, tons of invertebrates in here. My heat exchange system. Driving airside can be a challenge.
could just ask you to speak up a little.
Okay. I wasn't planning to talk during this. I'm going to just let it play. So I really hope the diversity and the color of this aquascape inspires you. It represents a beautiful rocky kelp forest habitat off the coast of BC. So I need you to forgive me if I seem to be reading my notes. This talk has become an organism evolving over the past month in response to the drastic changes taking place. Like you, I'm trying to navigate and understand the abrupt interruption in our lives. So first of all, your invasive species work is to be celebrated. You've all been restoring biodiversity in each of the areas you're working. And giving the native species a chance to potentially rebound, the ecosystems may return to a closer version of their natural state and balance. I applaud every one of you for that. It matters a great deal to me. I'm going to share 2 underwater stories that harken back to a time when introduction of species to a biome where they didn't belong happened without much study and at times without much thought. Here in 2020, we certainly understand how bad those types of introductions can be to the balance of biodiversity in each locale. I'm going to dive right in with an underwater story about Okanagan Lake here in BC, taking you back to 1966 to a time when the Canadian Ministry of Environment thought adding mysid shrimp would improve the kokanee salmon populations by providing more food. Unfortunately, in a deep lake like Lake Okanagan, the mysid shrimp had the space to vertically migrate daily, going from shallows to depth, and as a result, weren't in the right place at the right time very often for the kokanee to eat. And they were too big for the young salmon to eat, and they loved feeding on the zooplankton and phytoplankton that were the best food for the young kokanee salmon. So rather than enhancing populations, it caused them to dwindle and the mysid shrimp to thrive. By 1994, the Ministry of Environment was looking for creative solutions to this problem. They authorized the harvesting of mysids out of the lake for trawler fishing for 2 companies, one during the day and one at night. I met Nuri Fisher this past year at a conference. He purchased the company in 2005 that does the night fishing. Nuri's passionate about his unique business making a difference. His company, Piscine Energetics, supplies fresh frozen mysids for food, and it's a quality product that we purchase and use every day at the aquarium and at the Vancouver Aquarium at YVR. The kokanee salmon are slowly rebounding with this company's help to reduce mysid populations, and they're employing a lot of local people in the process. So now from local to global, from freshwater to saltwater, I have a story about invasive lionfish. Sorry, feeling a little parched. In Jamaica, about 4 years ago, I was trying to take a picture of some fish under an overhang, and as I pulled the camera and my hands out, and a lionfish drifted up. And they have venomous spines, so I was a little concerned. At that point in time, I had no idea that this was an invasive species in Jamaica. 2 years later, on a dive at the UNESCO World Heritage Site reefs off the coast of Belize, my husband and I got followed by this giant Nassau grouper. It was staring us down the whole dive. And we got out and said, why is the grouper sticking to us like glue? Someone explained that as the lionfish were invasive, one of the ideas was to spearfish them, feed them to the groupers, and hopefully the groupers would start hunting them themselves. It didn't work. The groupers just thought the divers were going to feed them. So they stopped the project, but those groupers really remember. My 3rd lionfish encounter was in Florida, in the Florida Keys, as a menu item, sushi in a restaurant. The owner of the restaurant was an avid diver, was upset with what was happening with the invasive lionfish on the Florida reefs. So he native to the Indo-Pacific, lionfish were first noticed on the Atlantic coast of the US in 1984, probably released accidentally by aquarium hobbyists, and they've spread. They can eat something 3/4 their size and end up vacuuming up about a dozen fish or invertebrates per day per fish. One scientist opened up an 18-centimeter lionfish, and it had a whole 9-centimeter blue chromis inside. That would be the equivalent of a human eating a small sheep in one bite. These fish are eating an enormous variety of species. I've seen estimates of about 70 different species. These are fish and invertebrate species that are all essential in different ways for reef balance. Lionfish are destroying the biodiversity in these areas, mowing through species that have not adapted to this fish that inadvertently just vacuums everything in its path. Without the predators from their homeland, lionfish are thriving. They can handle a wide range of water quality parameters. They can release eggs every 4 days, up to 2 million eggs per female per year. So we ordered that lionfish sushi and we were chatting. As the restaurant got quieter, we turned, and coming across the restaurant on a platter in all its glory was a lionfish head, spines and all, with the sushi in between and the tail. It's seared in my memory for all times. With the help of human predators, and actually other people were ordering it right after us. I thought this was brilliant. With the help of human predators, he's bringing the numbers down, but even more importantly, creating awareness. On the lionfish display at the Vancouver Aquarium, it says, if you're on the Atlantic coast, be sure and eat lionfish. It's a very sustainable choice. I found a great story about vacuuming the vacuum. The company Robots in Service of the Environment, RSE, have created the Guardian, a Roomba for the sea, a 20-pound robotic submersible that you can steer down, find a lionfish, shock it, not fatally. It sucks it in, up to about 20 of them in the tank, and then steers it to the surface to be harvested. I sure hope it works. At approximately $1,000 per unit, with the stores paying about $5 a pound for the yummy lionfish. It was delicious, by the way. This could be a decent fishing strategy. Seeing as the lionfish can congregate at 1,000 feet deep where nets and lines don't work very well, and breed at 200 to 400 feet deep where the spearfishers can't go, the diving spearfishers, this may be just the ticket to get the numbers down. So it's straightforward to notice when an invasive species is causing an issue when conditions are normal. With climate change at play, it's not so easy. There are not a lot of barriers in the ocean, and as conditions change around the globe, some creatures are moving to find what they need, whether it's the right temperature, better water quality, food, and so on. Some of the sedentary creatures won't be able to move. If they can't adapt, they're not going to survive. There's a circle of elephants in the room right now we need to address. Climate crisis, pandemic, mass extinction, greed, injustice. There may be more, but I have limited time. The three big elephants, climate crisis, pandemic, and mass extinction, are explicitly intertwined. We need to address all three together. We can't successfully deal with them one at a time. Greed. The current generation is being raised with 50 years of Earth Day, where there's a swelling movement to address sustainability, conservation, respect for nature, and aspects of human injustice that has created a desire to be better. Most of us no longer want to work for companies and corporations with outdated, polluting, and exploiting practices. Consumers are starting to demand new products when they buy are earth-friendly and fair trade. I heard a great statement recently: less is the new more. This is something we all need to consider in our lives and how we deal with things. The circular economy is rising with designing goods with the end in mind, looking at how nature doesn't produce much waste. How cool would it be if in 50 years from now, we hardly produce any waste? For companies, it's becoming a race to the top. Who's the greenest? Though we must keep a vigilant eye on greenwashing. Keep the pressure on to be truly headed in the right direction. The blue economy is a movement towards ocean-based jobs that are balanced and improving the way ocean commerce works currently, with a respect for maintaining biodiversity. Injustice, I really hope voters start to pressure our politicians for big change as they become aware that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and mayhem such as refugees and more climate refugees must be addressed. At some point, politicians will be unable to turn a blind eye. The recent issues sure make it feel as though Earth is really the one that's in charge here, and we need to work with, not against, this amazing force. One thing's for sure, we need to embrace change, flow with it like water. We need to work together to creatively envision what life on Earth could be, and then work on reverse engineering how we get there. The foundation of our new normal may end up looking quite a bit different, but the skills, the mindset, the cooperative determination that you've all experienced in your invasive species work are tools you can use moving forward. Play and laughter, they're critical now to help us enjoy life and navigate through challenging times. It helps us attain flow in our work and our lives. I feel the signs we've seen in nature as we've shut down so much of industry, halted a lot of our normal activities, is inspiring. We see it in the clean air that some have not seen for decades, the crystal clear water in places that have been murky for so long. This is what we need to consider very carefully moving forward. The natural world is very resilient and can bounce back, given the opportunity if it's not too late. We also have seen kind community and the example of holding each other up. You can hear it tonight with the banging the pots and pans. We're helping each other through difficult times and experiences. This is the hope we need to bring to light. Focus on, use as an example. We need to make sure to be involved and instrumental in all our circles of influence. No apathy, no excuses. Step by step, forward in love. I remain hopeful. I hope you do too. Thank you.
Patti, thank you. It's a pleasure to hear you speak, and I hope that I am joined by everyone in just thanking you for your presentation tonight. There were a few questions, so I think let's start with a simple one from Nicholas Wong here in Vancouver. He's wondering if the lionfish sushi was tasty. I think you did address this, but
it was really good. It was delicious. It really was, and that's one of the things is the spines are venomous, but the meat is really good and not a problem.
Thank you. Awesome. Adrian Zimmerman was wondering, when did you first encounter invasive species?
I have, I've known for a long time that the Himalayan blackberries are invasive. As a child, even, I was aware that, as much as I love watching the murmurating starlings in the sky, they've all been, they're an invasive species and they're not good for the environment. When I was going to BCIT in Fish, Wildlife and Recreation, I got really angry about the fact that the poor little red Douglas squirrels were getting outcompeted by the big gray and black squirrels. So whenever I see a Douglas squirrel, I'm like, you go, guy. Just love them. And I have done a bit of invasive plant pulling myself. The Stanley Park Ecology Society, I've actually been a member of that for a long time. My burrowing owl group started as a result of that group. And I've done some work up at White Lake Ranch pulling invasive species plants where they didn't belong. And when we're digging burrows for the burrowing owls up in Merritt and on the ranches up in Kamloops and Merritt area, we tend to pull anything that we think shouldn't be there while we're working on the burrowing owl digging.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And so Kiersey is wondering if European green crab invasions are going to become more common or more prolific in the face of climate change.
That's an interesting one. I'm aware that they're a problem. I'm not sure what parameters they thrive in, and I guess that'll be the question. I would have to do a bit more research to really comment directly on that. I am always concerned with things like large ships taking in ballast water that potentially have the tiny zoea crustacean, young crustaceans, and then spew it out to whatever port they get to, where it's not something that should be there, and becomes an invasive. So, we really have to think about all the practices we're doing as humans and how that's affecting things. Because, there's a lot more invasive than just what I, spoke about as far as underwater.
Is there any that, this is a personal interest, but any that you think need more attention or aren't being highlighted the way they should be, aquatic invasive species?
Well, one of the interesting things I read while I was preparing for this talk is that in San Francisco Bay, for instance, I think of our whole Pacific coast kind of together. In San Francisco Bay, there are areas that are 3/4 invasive species. And it's things like snails and those kinds of things in particular. But, it's pretty shocking to hear that it's that extensive.
That you've got these whole invasive communities rather than a single species causing impacts. Yeah.
Yes. That's shocking to me.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Jessica Lynn. Another question here. Do invasive species impact the aquatic water conditions or increase the process of climate change in any way?
That's another kind of bigger picture question. Depending on the species, like zebra mussels, things like that, are a filter feeder. And if you get tons of them, they can affect the water quality, sometimes for the better. Some things have been introduced for our benefit, things like oysters, like we have Japanese oysters on our coast and stuff. Some of the clams that we feed to the animals that we're taking care of are an invasive species, and so the harvesting of them is a positive thing, right? It's keeping on top of the numbers of them. I can't fully answer that question because it's kind of out of the realm of what I've researched, but I hope that's just a few more details that are helpful.
That's great. Yeah, it's when you have multiple competing impacts or different impacts on a system, it's always hard to tease apart, do these impacts stack? Do they complement each other? Do they cancel each other out? So I think that is quite a complex question, certainly. Rafael Narcisco would like to know what kind of planning was put into the different species that went into the YVR aquaria, and what are some of the unique challenges that you had to consider when designing the exhibit?
That's a good question. It's kind of a poetic justice, or like poetic license, that we put together that many types of rockfish. For instance, you would find them all on our coast, but perhaps not all together in one place. When choosing the species that went in, some of it was about balance as far as what'll eat what, and there, for instance, we had some brown rockfish in there, but they hung in the shadows all the time, and they kind of got beat up a little bit. So we sent them back to the aquarium. The wolf eels came in as a breeding pair that were part of a research project, and Waldorf and Wendy, to expand the gene pool. They were doing an aquaculture test. Wolf eels are eaten across the globe. Wolf eels aren't really. And our pair lay an egg mass that has 10,000 eggs. And so if you're able, they're great parents up to the point where the babies hatch out. And so they'll guard the egg. She wraps around it it's about the size of a rugby ball. She wraps around it like a cinnamon bun. And then he blocks the den so nobody can get in and eat their eggs. And then as soon as they're hatched out, they become part of the zooplankton. They're little guys about 2 inches long, and they're very voracious little eaters, lots of teeth and stuff. Very cool animals. So that group, we actually take their eggs. They're not too impressed with us, but it's part of a project, so I have to. and they get a little miffed with me for a few weeks afterwards. But, and then the eggs are raised in the lab and used in feed trials and stuff. So that pair came in as kind of a gift. And I had worked with wolf eels at the main aquarium downtown years prior, and I love wolf eels. They're just an amazing creature. And they're very gentle. Like, you have to watch your hands because they have strong jaws. They can bruise your hand. And Waldorf and Wendy don't have many teeth, but if they get ravenous, I just tuck my hands under my armpits so they can't get at them. Anyway, I don't know if I answered your question.
You did, yeah. And it's amazing the passion that you have for those wolf eels. They almost looked affectionate in the one video you were showing.
Yeah, well, what's happened is it was unintentional, but one day Waldorf was scratching to try and he was itchy. They stay in the den for a long time, and when they come out, they're itchy. And I was worried he was going to damage his eyes on the rocks. He was getting so crazy with it. So I picked him up and gave him a rub down, and he swam away and stopped, and he looked back at me. And I kind of created it. They come for scratches.
Yeah. They had no idea such a thing was possible before they met you, huh?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they're I'm feeling bad for them right now because the divers are not going in because we're working solo and we don't have a full team to dive. And so we've been doing all kinds of crazy things to try to get Waldorf to eat. Wendy will come to the surface to eat, but Waldorf won't. And but they can go a very long time. So wolf eels, when they lay their egg mass, they starve the whole time they're watching those eggs. So it can take a few months. It's a very interesting process. So I'm not too concerned about him yet. And I do have kind of a backup plan if he doesn't start eating in the next week or two. 2 days ago, when I took a dip net and I dropped a couple of clams right next to him, and his head was out of the den, he was looking at it, and then a bunch of other fish stole him. So I was like, So I think we'll get a meeting. He's just, Danny, my boss, said, oh, he's spoiled. And I thought, no, that's just what we do. We've always hand fed them once a week. So it's just a big adjustment for him, right?
Yeah.
And I hope to be back in there. I miss them. And the other piece of our biome there is that I do love bringing in every little thing. And I just geek out over the tiniest things. So, I'm concerned about feeding everything in that exhibit. So we do a lot of blended feeds. It's like a plankton milkshake it's kind of gross, but and so you'll see that the water's kind of cloudy or has particles in it. That's feeding all the filter feeders and all the tiny little things that I have in there. I love them all.
I could talk to you about this all night, Patti. Unfortunately, we are out of time. There's a couple of questions in the chat we haven't been able to get to. Do you mind if I send those your way and send me the
I can
answers?
Answer them and we'll send them out at the end.
Thank you so much. Excellent. Okay, well, this has been an absolute pleasure. And we're going to move to a brief movement break, but I wish that you could hear, I'm sure there's a round of applause going for you right now. Thanks, Patti.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.